The morning I drove to St. Michael's Hospital to surprise my husband, I had a thermos of his favorite dark roast in the cup holder, and my daughter asleep in her car seat behind me. It was her 4th birthday. I had called ahead to the nurse's station, not to his direct line, because I wanted it to be a surprise, and they told me Dr. Lawson was finishing his rounds and would be free by 11. I'd timed everything perfectly. I had the cake in the trunk, a chocolate hazelnut one from that little bakery on Elgin Street he always insisted was overpriced, but somehow kept ending up in our fridge. I had balloons. I had a card Lily had signed herself, pressing so hard with the crayon the paper almost tore. I was proud of myself, honestly. After 18 months of him working 12-hour days, of dinners going cold, of Lily asking at bedtime why Daddy never came to tuck her in anymore, I had decided that instead of waiting for him to make time for us, I would bring the celebration to him. I would walk into that hospital with our daughter and remind both of us, what we were doing all of this for. The receptionist at the main desk recognized me. I had been there enough times over the years, dropping off lunches, picking him up when his car was in the shop. "Mrs. Lawson," she said, and something crossed her face, not quite a smile. Something faster than that. "Is Dr. Lawson expecting you?" "No," I said. "It's a surprise, our daughter's birthday." I tilted my head toward Lily, who was holding the strings of 3 gold balloons and looking very serious about it. The receptionist picked up the phone. She turned slightly away from me when she spoke, dropping her voice low. I heard fragments. "His wife. No, she's here now, lobby." She set the phone down and looked at me with an expression I didn't understand yet. "Dr. Lawson is currently in a meeting," she said. "He asks if you can wait in the family lounge on the 2nd floor." I remember thinking that was odd. Not alarming, just odd. He could have texted me himself. He could have come down for 2 minutes to his daughter on her birthday. Lily tugged my hand. "Is Daddy coming?" "Soon, baby," I said. We went to the 2nd floor. The family lounge had those low upholstered chairs in dusty blue, the kind that are meant to feel calming and always feel slightly sad instead. There was a coffee machine and a basket of granola bars, and a window that looked out over the parking garage. Lily pressed her face against the glass and counted cars. I waited 40 minutes. When my husband finally appeared in the doorway, he was not alone. The woman beside him was wearing a white coat, but she wasn't dressed like she'd been working. Her hair was down. She had the particular stillness of someone who has arranged themselves carefully before entering a room, chin up, expression neutral, a stud calm. My husband stopped when he saw me. Something moved behind his eyes that I still think about. "Cecil," he said. "I didn't know you were coming today." "It's Lily's birthday," I said. I heard my own voice from a distance, very even, very controlled. "I called the nurse's station this morning. I said I was coming." "Right." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is Dr. Ashford. She's a colleague. She's been consulting on a case with me." Dr. Ashford smiled at me. It was a precise professional smile, the kind that gives away exactly nothing. Lily looked up at her father with her balloons and her crayon-signed card and said, "Daddy, it's my birthday. We brought cake." He crouched down and hugged her, and I watched him do it. The way you watch something familiar suddenly look unfamiliar, the way a word stops making sense if you stare at it too long. "Happy birthday, Lilybug," he said. But he didn't tell Dr. Ashford to excuse them. He didn't suggest they go downstairs to the cafeteria, just the 3 of us. He stood back up and looked at me with an expression I could only describe as uncomfortable, and said that he actually had another hour before he was free, that the consult wasn't finished, that maybe I could take Lily to that park on Somerset, and he would meet us after. I stood there for a moment with the thermos of his dark roast coffee still in my hand. "Okay," I said. I took Lily to the park. She went down the slide 6 times. She didn't ask about her father again until we were in the car going home, and then she asked very quietly, "Is Daddy going to come to my party tonight?" I said yes. I believed it when I said it. He came home at 9:30, after she was already asleep. I had left a slice of cake on the counter. He ate it standing at the kitchen island, scrolling his phone, and I sat across from him and looked at my husband and tried to find the thread back to the person I'd married. "The consult ran long," he said, without looking up. "Who is she?" I asked. He looked up then. "I told you. She's a colleague." "I know what you told me." He set the fork down. "Cecil, don't do what?" I said. "I brought our daughter to see you on her birthday. You kept us waiting in a lounge for 45 minutes. You didn't even come to her party. I just want to understand what's happening." "Nothing is happening. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. The fellowship review is in 6 weeks. The board has been—" "I know about the fellowship review," I said. "I've known about it for 8 months. I've been managing everything at home so you could focus. I just want to know who Dr. Ashford is." He said her name was Renata Ashford. He said she was a cardiologist from Vancouver, consulting on a complex case. He said it in the tone of voice people use when they're telling the truth about facts but something larger is being left out. I went to bed before him that night. I lay in the dark, and I thought about my mother, who had a saying she used when she sensed I was avoiding something. The thing you're afraid to look at is always smaller once you've looked. In the morning, I called my older brother. My brother Callum is the kind of person who, when you call him at 7 in the morning and say you need him, doesn't ask questions. He just says, "Where do you need me?" I told him what had happened. Not in a panicked way. I'm not someone who panics, I've never been wired that way. I just told him the facts in order. The way you'd describe a chart to a doctor. There was a pause on the line. "Do you want me to find out?" he said. "I want to know if there's something to find," I said. Callum works in corporate finance. He is quiet and thorough and very good at following money. He said he would make some calls. I went about my week. I took Lily to her swimming lessons on Tuesday, her music class on Thursday. I cooked dinners my husband complimented without looking up from his laptop. I watched him very carefully, the way you learn to watch something when you're not sure yet what you're seeing. On Friday, Callum called me back. "She's not just a consultant," he said. He didn't need to say more, something in his voice told me the exact shape of the thing before he described it. But he did describe it. He had talked to someone who had talked to someone. I didn't ask how. Callum has never explained his networks and I've learned not to need him to. And what he'd been told was that Dr. Ashford had been in Ottawa for 3 months. Not for one case. She had an apartment on Laurier. She had been seen with my husband at Becta, at a wine bar on Bank Street, at a private function at the NAC 3 months. Lily had just turned 4. I sat down at the kitchen table. The morning light was coming through the window at that particular angle that turns everything gold for about 20 minutes, and I remember noticing it with a strange clarity, the way you notice small things when the large ones are too much to fully hold. "Okay," I said. "Tell me what you want to do," Callum said. "Here is what most people don't know about me, because I've always been quiet about it. My father built one of the most successful private healthcare consulting firms in Ontario before he retired. My 2 brothers and my sister all work in sectors adjacent to it. We are not a family that is loud about what we have. My father used to say that the loudest thing you can do is simply stop. Stop investing. Stop supporting. Stop showing up. The silence," he said, "speaks for itself." My husband has accepted a significant research development grant 8 months ago to expand his cardiology department's diagnostic imaging program. The grant had been channeled through a private foundation, my family's foundation. My father had signed the documents personally. At the time, it had felt like a gesture of faith in my husband, in our marriage, in the idea that we were building something together. I called my father that afternoon. I am his youngest daughter. I have never once asked him to intervene in my personal life. When I say I called him and told him what I knew, I want you to understand the weight of that. It was not easy. It was the hardest call I had made in years. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a silence. Then he said, simply, "I'll call the foundation's legal team this afternoon." I said, "I don't want to hurt the program. The patients. The program will transition," he said. "The funding will be redirected. This is not your fault, and it is not the patient's fault. It is his." That evening, my husband came home earlier than usual. He set his bag down, loosened his tie, and asked what was for dinner. He was in a better mood than he'd been in weeks. I remember thinking there's a specific kind of ease that comes over people when they think the thing they're hiding is secure. I said I'd ordered Thai, that it was in the oven keeping warm. I poured him a glass of wine. "The grant review meeting is next week," he said, sitting down. "I think the board is going to approve the Phase 2 expansion. It's going to be significant funding." I nodded. "Actually," he said, "your father might want to be involved. It could be a good look for the foundation." I looked at my husband across the table. I looked at him for a long moment. "I think my father has already made a decision about his involvement," I said. He didn't understand what I meant. He moved on to something else, and I let him. The call came the following Tuesday morning. I was dropping Lily at daycare when my husband's name appeared on my screen, and I pressed decline and kept driving. Callum had already briefed me. The grant administrators had been notified that the foundation was exercising a contractual review clause, standard in all of their agreements, a detail my husband's team had apparently not scrutinized closely when they signed. The clause allowed for full withdrawal of uncommitted funds in the event of a material change in the circumstances of the recipient's primary institutional sponsor. My father's lawyers had determined that the breakdown of the relationship between the foundation's primary liaison, me, and the grant recipient constituted exactly that. My husband called 4 more times before noon. I was in a meeting with a family lawyer named Susan Tran, who had been recommended to me by my sister. who had used her for a real estate dispute several years prior and described her as someone who didn't waste words. Susan Tran did not waste words. She laid out my options with the precision of someone assembling a piece of furniture from instructions written in plain language. Ontario family law, she said, was actually quite straightforward in situations like mine. Matrimonial, home, spousal support, child support calculated against his physician income. She walked me through each column. When she asked if I had documentation of the relationship, I said my brother was compiling it. She nodded as if this were a perfectly normal thing to say, which in her office it probably was. I want to be honest about this part. I did not feel powerful sitting in that office. I felt tired. I felt something that was not quite grief but lived in the same neighborhood. A tiredness at having been wrong about something I had been so certain of. I had married someone I thought I knew completely. I had built a life around that certainty, and it turned out the certainty had been sitting on something hollow. But I also felt something else underneath the tiredness. Something very still and very clear. I had never needed my husband to have a life. I had loved him and chosen him and built something with him willingly, but I did not need him in the way he had perhaps counted on. My family was intact. My daughter was healthy. I had my work. I'm an urban planner with the city of Ottawa, a job I've held for 9 years and genuinely love. I had my father and my brothers and my sister and my friends and a life that existed independently of this man. And that life was still there, waiting, completely undamaged. He couldn't take any of it. He called 8 times that day. He appeared at the house at 6:30, and Lily ran to the door when she heard his key. And I let her, because whatever was happening between us was not happening between him and his daughter. I stood in the kitchen while they sat on the living room floor, and she showed him the drawing she'd made at daycare. A house, a son, what she described as our family dog, despite the fact that we did not have a dog. When she went to get her pajamas, he came to the kitchen doorway. The foundation is pulling the grant, he said. I know, I said. He stared at me. The board meeting is in 4 days, he said. This will derail the entire phase 2. Do you understand how much work has gone into this? I do, I said. I also understand how long Dr. Ashford has had an apartment on Laurier. The color left his face. Cecile, you should probably make arrangements for somewhere else to stay, I said. I'll have Susan send over the initial documents this week. I've asked her to keep things as straightforward as possible. I don't want a war. I just want this to be finished. He said her name, Renata, like I was supposed to do something with it. He said it wasn't what I thought. He said the timing of the grant withdrawal was vindictive. He said my father had no right. I turned back to the stove and I stirred the pasta. Lily likes it with butter and parmesan, I said. I'll make enough for 2 if you want to stay for dinner. For her sake. He stayed for dinner. He put Lily to bed. I heard him reading to her. Something about a bear who loses his hat. And I sat at the kitchen table and drank my tea and felt, for the first time in months, that I was in my house. The next few weeks were not simple. Anyone who tells you that leaving a marriage is straightforward is either lying or has never done it. There were moments in the middle of the night when I lay awake and questioned everything. There were moments at the grocery store when I would reach for something and realize I was still, out of habit, buying for 2. There were conversations with Lily that I'd been dreading, and that turned out to be gentler than I feared. She was 4, and 4-year-olds live in the present tense in a way that is sometimes heartbreaking and sometimes the most merciful thing in the world. She said to me one night, after I told her that Daddy was going to be living somewhere else for a while, "Is it because he made you cry?" I had not cried in front of her. I had been so careful. Sometimes grown-ups need to live in different houses, I said. She thought about this. Okay, she said. Can we get a dog now? I laughed. I actually laughed, sitting on the edge of her bed in the dark, and it was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. We'll talk about it, I said. The Fellowship Review Board met 3 weeks after the grant withdrawal was formalized. Callum had, in the intervening period, quietly passed along what he'd compiled, the documentation of my husband's relationship with Dr. Ashford, to 2 members of the hospital's ethics committee. Not to destroy him. I wasn't interested in destroying him. I was interested in making sure the people who made decisions about his professional conduct had accurate information about his professional conduct. The review was postponed pending an internal assessment. The Phase 2 expansion was put on hold. A separate review of the department's expenditures was initiated as a matter of procedure. Dr. Ashford returned to Vancouver. I know this because she updated her professional profile online, and I know because Callum knows things and sometimes tells me. My husband did not take a formal position without the fellowship. He is still a cardiologist. He still works at St. Michael's. He is a good doctor, I believe, whatever else he is, and his patients shouldn't suffer for his failures as a husband. But the trajectory he had mapped for himself The specific arc of prestige and institutional power he had been climbing toward. That was altered. Not by me, exactly. By the choices he had made, meeting the architecture of consequences they were always going to produce. I moved the things he'd left in the front hall out to the porch one Saturday morning in October, and I called him, and he came and got them. He stood on the porch and looked at me and said, "I didn't think you'd actually do this." I don't know exactly what he meant. I didn't ask. I said, "Lily is at my mother's this afternoon. If you want to see her this week, text me and we'll sort out a time." He nodded. He picked up the boxes. I went back inside and I put the kettle on. My sister came over that afternoon, and we drank tea and she let me talk. And she didn't try to fix anything or offer perspective I hadn't asked for. She just sat across from me at the kitchen table. And the autumn light came through the window at that particular angle I've always loved. And Lily's drawings were still stuck to the fridge with alphabet magnets. And the house was quiet in the way that a house is quiet when it belongs to you. I didn't need to say anything about what I'd done, or what I'd chosen, or what came next. It was enough to sit there in my kitchen and know, simply and completely, that I had not waited for someone to tell me what I was worth. I had already known.